My name is Jameul. I'm the chair of AES Atlanta section, and we are holding a location sound mixer webinar. We have a couple local sound mixers here that we'll be speaking to about what they do, how the industry is, what equipment they use, how can you get involved, and any other questions that you may have toward the end of our program here. But let's do a little bit of housekeeping. If you don't know, you guys, if you aren't AES members, you can become a member by going to aes.org and finding a section in your area and becoming a member that way. That's aes.org. Our section is aesatl.org if you want to become a member of AES Atlanta section. What AES is, it's an audio engineering society. So any component of audio, whether it be music, whether it be broadcast audio, whether it be creation of plugins or radios and cars, electronic audio, beat making, any component of audio, you are all welcome to come and join because we cover a gambit of audio engineering areas. Also, if you want more information, you can check our website. We again at aes.org, and we also have a local website here, and I'm going to share that with you now. So you can check out our links here on social media. Here it is. Here are our social media links here. It is aesatl.org, and Twitter and Facebook are at AES Atlanta, and our Instagram is at AES_Atlanta. So take note of our social media handles. If you want to contact us, please feel free. And my social media handle or my AES handle is chair@aes.atl.org. That's chair, CHAIR @aesatl.org. If you got any questions, if you want to contact me directly. So we're kind of waiting on a couple more of our panelists here to help us out. But while we wait, I would like to introduce two of our panelists here. We have Scott Beatty and we have Nicholas Mentor. So Scott, can you give us a brief overview of who you are, how long you've been in the industry, what do you do, and how's the industry now? And Nick, just go ahead and brief us on those questions as well when you get the chance. So go ahead, Scott, start us off.
All right, I'm an Atlanta production sound mixer. I've been doing this for 12 years now. I started out in post-production for about 3 years and moved into production sound, and that's kind of where I found my home and where I like to work. I've worked in everything from documentary, what they call ENG, electronic news gathering for news, sports, moved into reality television, and I've done some scripted work. I've been doing music playback for shows in town here, Dynasty, Stranger Things, Raising Dion, and yeah, just really got a wide range of work that I do in the different areas that encompass sound recording for broadcast and film.
All right, thanks. Go ahead, Nick. Nick, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Mentor. I am a production sound mixer. I've had the pleasure of working with both of these gentlemen, both Scott Beatty and Jameul. My journey kind of started in 2005. I always grew up as a child playing the piano, so that's where I found my love for the arts. From there, it just transitioned into me getting into audio engineering. I've worked with a lot of major artists that you guys might be familiar with, 2 Chainz, The Futures, all those guys started out producing records, recording, and mixing. That later also transitioned into me writing music for film and television as a composer. Then I later transitioned into doing things like audiobooks. And then finally, I got into game audio, worked my way a little bit through post-production, and then finally found myself being a location sound mixer. So there've been a wide gambit of, features, documentaries, and reality TV shows that I've worked on. It's definitely been an exciting journey, and, doing audio, just in the sense, no matter what it is, production or post-production, I always feel like, it's always changing. It's so diverse, and you really can never get bored with it.
So, sounds like you guys have great experience. I know I've worked with Nick. Scott has referred me to a couple jobs myself, and I've had fun. So I appreciate that again, Scott and Nick, for you joining us. So since COVID had interrupted our workflow, and we just been kind of hanging out, have you guys ever been doing any what they call extensive learning while you have been on this timeout?
I've been doing some learning mostly from the number of webinars and webcasts that have been up with different industry professionals. Sometimes the information in this industry is very guarded by people in it, and so it's been great, the amount of access and privilege that we've had to be able to listen into some leading experts in the field and attend sessions and grow professionally during this time. So that's been great.
So let's continue with that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Can you be a little more specific about what particular webinars you've been following, or what particular topics that you've been researching to enhance your skill set as a mixer or a bag mixer or A1 or A2? And we can talk about what those positions are in a minute, but can you elaborate more on those webinars?
Well, the specific webinars, I think Sabi had one that was in the freelance Facebook group, was posted there, but that had some really good interviews with, there was one that was specific to a mixer who'd done a lot of work with musicals, and they just had some really good practical advice for working with directors, holding your ground when you're fighting for a position of getting better sound to tell the story. There's been other webinars from music playback, timecode. There's just any number of topics. The topic kind of changes, from week to week, depending on what webinar is being hosted and by whom, but generally just the ability for people to all group together and have a topic and learn about the equipment. Zaxcom had a seminar where they unveiled their new RX-8 receiver hardware. And so that was kind of fun to see gear revealed that maybe would have happened at NAB, but happening online because of the situations that we're in right now.
For me, I've been taking this time to really just focus on business. And just in terms of like my learning, I've been researching more equipment that I'm thinking about adding to my arsenal. I've been strictly getting even more so into Dante systems, the flexibility of them, how they will affect me on set. But also I started to think about what new protocols do I need to set forth with COVID. I've been jumping on a lot of different webinars as well, speaking to my other peers within the industry and just trying to follow what's going on with the union, and also, the list of regulations that Georgia's putting out as well. On the business side, I've really been focusing on business credit, how I can leverage that in terms of just being a better business owner with my equipment and equipment rentals, dealing with production companies. And, I'm trying to just come up with strategic ways where everything doesn't always have to come out of my pocket, where I can still get the things that I need and be profitable and successful within this space.
Great answers. So let's get to brass tacks. We call this webinar location sound mixing. There are other types of mixing that occur. We have studio in-house mixing, we have television production, in-house studio mixing, we have home recording studio mixing, we have bag mixing, and we have various types of mixing. So what is the difference, or is there a difference between a studio mixer, a bag mixer, and a cart mixer? First, if you can, define each. And if you can recall the difference, the differences of each. So that studio mixing, bag mixing, cart mixing. Feel free, Scott or Nick, whichever one.
Yeah, when I think about studio mixing, you're mixing for a final product. A lot of times in production sound, the things that we're interested in recording is maybe not necessarily the entire scene, but we're really interested in the dialogue of a scene that's going to play out on TV or broadcast. We try to record other things as well, but that's the gist of what we're going after, is getting a clean dialogue capture. And a lot of the ways that we function is we're not mixing for an audience. We're not mixing for a final record, because of course the final track for the film or TV usually happens in post-production. But we're going to be getting a mix so that the people that are on set, the director, the script supervisor, everyone who needs to hear on set is able to hear. The actors can hear in their ears if they need certain cues or music playback timing. Then that all happens in the sound department on a film set. And it would differ from, say, a studio mixer. I think it maybe in some cases is a little closer to what a live mixer does, because a lot of the things that you're trying to juggle and balance are happening dynamically in front of you. The sets move very quickly. The workflow moves pretty quickly at times. And it really is a matter of getting everything dialed in and working and be in the background and not be causing any sort of holdup in the process.
I think for me, my experience was a lot of these skills are transferable when you're going in between, to me, post-production and post-production. And it all starts with your basic understanding of understanding signal flow. Once you understand signal flow, even if you're in a studio setting, a live arena setting, or even in a location sound setting with a bag, you're receiving signal in that you're recording, but you're also sending signal somewhere else. And when that kind of clicked in my brain, I just realized that the tools that I was using just were different when I was on set versus if I were in a studio setting or had a large console. I started to realize that this large console that I was used to using is just in a bag form, and the buttons and knobs are in different places, and the menus are in different places. But one thing that always remained true when it came to recording something, my job is to control the space as much as I can to get the clean sound the best that I can to my ability, to have proper gain structure. And as things are coming in, normally I have to send them out somewhere. So like Scott said, are we sending this to directors? Are we sending this to producers? Are we sending this to other members on the team if you're doing location sound? But let's say you're in a studio setting, and you're working with the artist, you might just be sending a headphone feed back to them. You might just be making a feed come out of the speakers so people can listen live within the studio. So we just got to understand that things come in and things go out. When it comes to post-production, now we're in the editing space. Our job is to put the icing on the cake. Let's take out all the inaccuracies. Let's soup it up. Let's make it beautiful. Let's put our artistic touch on it while still maintaining the views and the vision of the executive producer and directors.
Very good answers, fellas. So let's stick to that for a minute. Is there an absolute for those positions? Like, are you just going to be, I'm just an absolute bag mixer? Am I an absolute cart mixer, or am I an absolute studio recording engineer? Or since we have you guys here, can you speak on, do you cross over into each? Let's say, in my experience, because I come from a studio background, I still equip myself with a setup just in case I have downtime and I have a client come to me and say, hey, can you do some audio post? Tell us about your experience there.
the grass is green wherever you water it at, right? So seriously, like, yes, you know what? You can be great at post-production, editing, and sound design. You can be a great composer. You can be great at location sound. You can be a great A2 or a great boom op or even a great mixer. But what I learned over time, just by touching all of these different things, you really got to put your 10,000 hours in on one thing and market yourself that way for one position, because that's what people will know you as. And, you know, in this industry, to me, my experience is that everything is pretty much word of mouth. Like, of course, you know, you want to make yourself presentable and marketable, and you might do things on social media and reach out to other people. But if people know you for doing playback, every time a playback call comes, they're going to say your name. If people know you specifically for being a reality mixer, you're going to get a lot of those calls. If people know you for being, you know, a cart mixer on, you know, tier 2 and tier 3 shows, you probably get a lot of those calls. So you have to think about what is the end goal for you and where do you want to be 10 years from now? And that's the grind, and that's what you should be working towards in terms of, you know, sharpening your skills. Now, of course, I will also say, yes, arm yourself with, you know, some of these other skill sets and be prepared, because guess what? You'll get a call that say, hey, can you do this? Yes or no? When you already have the relationship and you say yes, you're not missing any money when you do that. So you might step into another area of audio for a weekend, but then you'll go right back. You know, I've been able to generate a lot of additional jobs like that just through referrals. And then anytime I got double booked on a project, I already knew I had people like Jameul, Scott, a lot of these other guys where I can send them jobs. And guess what happened in return? When they got double booked, they shared the jobs with me. So, you know, it's really just about being a part of a strong community and, you know, letting people know, you know, exactly what it is that you want to do, but also what you're capable of as well.
Scott, anything on that?
Yeah, I think that there's so much area for you to spread your wings in so many different directions with sound, especially in the Atlanta market. In LA, there's a number of jobs, and people can get into positions where they're doing pretty much the same exact type of job over and over and over. And some people keep that sort of work style in Atlanta, but a lot of the sound mixers that I know, they may do interview, corporate, broadcast, news, sports, you know, film mixing, TV mixing, you know, boom work. You know, there's so many different overlap areas that it comes into. I mean, you'll get people wanting to know, like, what do we do about the acoustics at my church on Sunday, and like, you know, music mixing, and, you know, can you be a DJ, and like just any number of, like, if it relates to audio, you're probably going to get asked to do it at some point. So it makes a real good field to grow what you know how to do and see how the different areas of audio overlap. There's a lot of that.
I definitely encourage people to explore and really figure out what they really love and like. I just don't see a lot of people going from production to post-production. That's where the disconnect is for me.
So you think they just directly go from whatever background to post-production or field production and stay there?
I just don't see a lot of people in field production 1 week and then going to post-production for another project and then coming back to field production. So like when it comes to field production, I mostly see people staying in that arena, documentaries, ENG, television, movies, things of that nature, TV series. And then like people that are in post-production, I see, okay, composition, sound design, Foley recording, ADR, audio for video games. That's kind of like a niche on its own.
Good. So since you brought it up, we may have some participants or some attendees who may not know what the difference is between field production and post-production, and what defines each. Scott, could you give us a brief overview of each? And then we can get, as we talk, we'll get into a little more specifics
Sure. Yeah, in production audio, your goal is to record the voices and the scene that's playing out in front of you. So if doors are getting slammed, you're recording those. If you're in a field and you need the ambience of the field with the bugs and the traffic in the background and whatever else, you record that. But your goal for production sound is to capture the performance that the actors are giving you as best you can. The goal in post-production is to take all of those field recordings and to put them in the edit with the picture edit to make sure that everything is denoised, that you're not hearing any noises, any hums, any clothing. You're re-recording anything that was just too poor of a capture in the field, and you're putting in things like sound effects, music, and working on the tone and the impact and the feel of the final presentation of the audio. So that's sort of where things happen in production and post-production. Production is everything that's getting shot, and post-production is everything after that.
Nick, want to add?
I think Scott nailed that right on the head.
Well, good. Good then. Since we all are a part of the location sound mixer field, let's talk shop. Let's talk about pieces of gear. Sometimes we interchange the word equipment with gear, but when you become involved in certain fields, you use the specific terminology. So when we go shopping, we're shopping for gear. We don't shop for equipment like hammers, nails, but they're used as our hammers and our nails and our drills and impact wrenches to build what we're trying to do in our production set, you know, to get the quality of sound that we would like. So either Scott or Nick, can you kind of talk about your humble beginnings and pieces of gear that you started with? And do you still have those pieces?
I would love to talk about that. This is the fun stuff, right?
Yes, sir.
So, all right, when I got started, I was a kid, right? Like I was a kid, and the first thing I ever recorded was I would make mixtapes. My favorite artist was Michael Jackson, and I would take cassette tapes and I would duplicate the tapes, and then I would start putting other songs together once I learned. So that's where it kind of started for me. And then the first time I ever picked up a camera, like for real, I think I had to be in like the 12th grade. It was just one of those, you know, flip cameras you walk around with. And then when I finally got into college, that's when I started realizing, oh, this audio and film thing is real. So piece of gear that I actually had was a DAT recorder. I don't know if you guys remember that recorder, but you take a cassette tape,
Yeah.
you know, you can mix left and right. It was like 2 channels, and I walk around with a boom pole and a mic. I think I had like a Rode NTG1 or NTG2 in there. And then finally, when I moved to Atlanta, man, I borrowed $600 from my mom. She was also paying half of my rent at the time. And there was a lady that I had worked with before. She was one of my mentors, and I think she worked with CBS. And I bought a 2-channel digital Zoom recorder from her, a Zoom H4n, I believe. And I bought a Rode NTG3 microphone, and I had an XLR cable that was about this long. So literally, I was getting on Craigslist doing shows, and I had to hold the H4n, yep, like this, and I had to hold the boom pole at the same time because the cable wasn't long enough for me to clip it on my hip, right? So, yes, sir, that's how I started. From there, you know, I started working on different types of projects, you know, and I just focused on my booming technique. And like I said, controlling my space and recording solid audio. I was doing commercials and other types of things that were really lower budget, and they came out really well. Certain things started winning awards. I started getting additional calls, and that's when I started generating some money. From there, I ended up buying a Zoom H6. Right? So what I liked about the H6 is it had the knobs, but there was no bag that was created for that. So I would literally keep it in no, matter of fact, I took a guitar strap, right? And I would put it around me like this. And I also went and bought some Sennheiser G3s. So, you know, these take AA batteries, and I would put each wireless receiver across the belt pack. So I really looked like Rambo. Like I had this, you know, big strap right here, H6 connected, you know, 4 receivers and a boom pole. And I'm walking around doing gigs. It's like, yo, who is this sound guy, right? So as I started learning more about the industry and what was industry standard, you know, I ended up getting mentors and other people, because like I said, I understood signal flow, I understood standard practices, but what I didn't understand at the time was, hey, you know, if you want to make big boy noise, you got to have big boy toys. So I said, hey, what is everybody else using that's respected and trusted and safe within this industry? And it was sound devices products and electrosonics. So at that point, that's when I transitioned and I pivoted and I started getting different types of gear. So I think my first professional piece of gear when it came to a mixer would have been the Sound Devices 633. You know, I started off renting that, you know, from other mixers, which then actually helped me get more jobs because they started referring me because I was renting so much. I later on started purchasing gear from other people. And what I learned about purchasing gear, I remember, you know, yep, that's it right there. One of my mentors, Flip, told me, he said, hey, Nick, it's not about how much money you make, it's about how much money you keep. So, you know, when other mixers would sell gear $1,000, $2,000 off, I would buy it immediately. Even if I didn't have the money, I would put it on credit and I would pay it off. So I got that piece of gear. Then I started buying, you know, electrosonics, you know, 411s. Then I started buying, you know, SRBs and SRCs. And then eventually I ended up having a cart with a 688. I've got monitors now. I've got a variety of different wireless, a variety of different microphones, you know, a wide array of cabling and timecode cables. And now I have multiple rigs. You know, I have a bag rig that matches my cart. And it's just something that you continue to build and build over time. And after every job, I would buy another piece of gear that I thought I would potentially need. And it's definitely put me in a position to be successful. And if there's any job that doesn't have a piece of gear that I need, of course, you know, I could go rent it from another mixer or one of our wonderful houses like Trew Audio and, you know, get the job done. But, you know, my bass, when I started, you know, getting a lot more gigs was a 633 and, you know, 2 wireless.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, sir. Scott, go ahead and tell us about your humble beginnings.
Yes, the humblest of beginnings. Well, when I started out, I worked for a production company here in town called Inertia Films, and so I was managing their inventory of equipment and working on their gigs, and also managing the equipment that they would send out with freelancers who are working on other gigs that they may have. They may, you know, have 2 or 3 jobs going out at one time. So I've got to get equipment packages made up for all the various types of work that might come in. And so it was great because I had a chance to manage a professional equipment inventory and put it together for things that may be an interview or things that may be recording 4 or 5 people, you know, doing dialogue for a more of a film type situation. And so that was great because I was able to play with a lot of gear that wasn't mine, that I didn't have to buy before I made my decisions about what I was going to buy and commit to. Because we all know that the second you walk out of the sound shop with that receipt in your hand, that is your piece of equipment. And if you decide the very next day that you don't like it, then you can sell it on the used market and, you know, take 10 to 15% off just because you just walked out the store with it. So making these commitments to equipment is a really big leap for a lot of us when you've got to put $1,000, $2,000, $7,000 on something and it just came out, you know, a month or 2 ago. And, you know, if it ends up not working, it's going to be a really big thing for you. So my very first piece of equipment when I left the company that I was working for and began doing freelance work was I got a Wint X4 field mixer, which is probably about 25 more years old. It's ancient. The 442 is what most people would be more familiar with. And that was kind of before that. So it was just cheap as dirt field mixer. I got two of the best quality wireless that I could afford. I got two Zaxcom digital wireless. So my wireless cost probably 10 times as much as the mixer that they were running into. And I got a good microphone and a good boom pole. I got a 416 and I got a K-Tech 13-foot boom pole that I have been using ever since. So that's been kind of my main direction as I've been building up my own equipment, is to buy equipment that if I'm buying it as a starter piece of gear, that it has a place in my gear as I move on from that. So, you know, the first wireless that I bought, I'm still using. The microphone, the boom microphone that I got, that's now my backup boom microphone. When I buy a lot of the pieces of my gear, if they're not the piece that I'm going to eventually be, you know, wanting to put in that place, if I need to buy a cheaper piece of gear, then I'll usually go with an older piece of pro equipment rather than a newer piece of, like, you know, what you think of as prosumer equipment. So, you know, Zoom recorders and those sorts of things. I've got, you know, a handy recorder, but usually when I try to put pieces into my inventory and I've really got to do it on a budget, I start looking at older pieces of pro gear, because a lot of the old wireless, a lot of the old microphones, boom poles, if they were good back in the day and they were kept up with, then they're probably still good for what we need to use them for.
Very good. We're going to stick with that topic since you brought it up. Pro gear versus prosumer gear. There's a lot of prosumer gear out there, and there have been arguments, I wouldn't say arguments, more of a debate and utilization of the prosumer gear versus the pro gear as in quality, weight, durability. Let's look at two that have been coming along, like the 633 versus the Zoom H. Is it an H? H8?
Well, they've got the F8.
Yeah, F8.
Which was the 8-channel one that really took off and kind of secured that place for them.
So would you consider that, because I've read certain blogs and I've read certain websites, and certain people will say that they use one as a backup or they use one as a main. Would you consider a Zoom F8 prosumer, or would you consider it pro gear?
The F8 is really on that fine line. I think of it as, in terms of camera folks will recognize the Canon 5D Mark II when that one came around for camera equipment. It was something that was very inexpensive compared to cinema cameras. You could put a lens on it and get a look that's very similar to that shallow depth of field, kind of those creamy backgrounds, and the way that it handles light, the way that cinema cameras do. But it was at a much lower price, and there were a couple of, you know, things that you kind of had to accept a little bit of a funky, you know, workflow when you're building up rigs for these things. But you could turn out great video, and people really gravitated towards that. And we've had sort of the same thing with the Zoom F8 with pro audio, is that it does a lot of the things that the pro audio recorders do. It has the track count that you need. It's got the number of inputs that you need. It's got, you know, a minimal amount of outputs that you can use for sending to other places. And it gives you multi-track audio with a decent quality that you're not going to get pushback for turning in files that sound like this. You know, the thing that really keeps me from putting the F8 into the pro territory is that there's a couple of things that are really, they're not written as much that you get with pro quality equipment, but they are important things. is that, you know, when you buy a piece of pro gear and you come in and your equipment has the same brand and the same level of being filled out as the professional peers that you're surrounded with, then you get seen in that space by the people hiring you or the other sound mixers, or just your reputation is tied to the tier of equipment that you're using, regardless of what that equipment is doing. And that's one of the areas that the Zoom F8, you can get a lot of the functions that a professional user needs, but the name on the equipment is still Zoom, and people still associate that with consumer level gear. The other thing that you don't get with the consumer level gear, they're made for a price point. You've got the features that are great, and they're made for a price point that's phenomenal for what you're getting. You know, for people to think for $1,000 they could get everything that the Zoom F8 is getting, you know, a year before the Zoom F8 came out, people would say that's crazy. So the F8 really set a new price standard for what you can get in that small package, but what that price doesn't include is the service and support. When you buy a piece of gear from Sound Devices or a piece of gear from Electrosonics or Zaxcom or any of the professional companies that are servicing the pro sound community, you're dealing with companies that are working for a very, very small market. They're making machines that, you know, they just have to have that markup in order to make the business make sense. They're not going to sell hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them right off, you know, the start, like the Zoom F8 likely did, but they're also going to be coming with a level of service and support. Your equipment goes down, you need to find another one in town. The professionals around you are probably going to be using, you know, the Sound Devices, the Electrosonics. They're going to have the pieces of equipment that are similar to what you use. So in a lot of the ways, if you want to move into that professional space and if you want to exist in that area, my advice is to buy the equipment that you see the professionals and your peers around you using, because when your stuff goes down and you're going to need a backup, that's who you're going to have to reach out for, and you're going to get something from a rental house. You're going to need to know the things that they have on hand.
Good, thank you. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's a lot of it has to do with reputation. So, you know, before the Zoom F8 came out, you know, like I've used the Zoom H6 and the H4n, and there'll be little small things like, you know, the material that it's made out of. You know, if you have any other type of device next to your mixer, it would affect the recording. Like literally, you could hear it. You know, if let's say, you know, you had a cell phone in your pocket, right, and you were right next to one of their older Zoom models, you would hear static in the recording. Literally, that would happen. When you have a pro level piece of gear, because it's made out of the right types of material, you can put your phone right on top of the mixer and nothing would happen. Now, I'm not advising you guys to do that, but the point is that, you know, when you have a solid reputation for this being a good piece of gear, every piece of gear that comes out after that, they're going to build on the standards that they already had. And I think with Zoom being so new, you know, they had some things that they had to build on. Now, in comparison to what they have now, I definitely feel like their equipment is 100 times better than what they had before. You know, the first being that, you know, their mixers now can take and send timecode, which was something that they weren't able to do. So right there, that just kind of made it a pro-consumer level piece of equipment starting out. But now, you know, they've definitely built a reputation of having, you know, better pieces of gear. You know, at the price point, yeah, I think it's a great price point to be able to take 8 or 10 channels in and record some decent audio. As a backup device, you know, my advice is when you have a backup, it should be probably exactly the same. So if I'm using a 633, I probably want to back it up with another 633 versus backing it up with a Zoom, because they have different preamps and that will change the integrity of the audio.
Very good, very good. So I'm going to pause right there because we're going to get into, we're still going to talk about prosumer versus pro gear. And we're going to talk Sennheiser, Electro Zaxcom. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna announce our social media pages and stuff. I'm gonna share this real quick and then we'll get right back to the conversation. So just hold tight, get a drink of water, and chew on something if you want to for a second before we get right back to our questions here. Let me see, where'd it go? Right here. So I'm just gonna put this up real quick and talk about this, and then we'll get right back to it, giving you guys a little break here. So we are actually having a webinar with Scott Beatty and Nicholas Mentor, talking about location sound mixing. We're talking about gear. I keep saying equipment. We keep talking about gear, fundamentals of sound mixing, the startup process, how they started. If you have any inquiries, feel free to hit our Q&A box, or also you can check us out and ask questions here at aesatl.org. That's our webpage, and you can check us out on Twitter and Facebook at AES Atlanta, or our Instagram page at AES_Atlanta. We want to welcome everybody and thanks everybody for attending. If you have any questions as well, you can also feel free to email our secretary, whose name is Jeremy, at secretary@aesatl.org. That's secretary@aesatl.org, and we'll make sure that we'll address your questions to our panelists or any general questions you may have. Also, if you don't have your AES membership, go to aesatl.org, find your section in your area and sign up and become a part of your section nearest you, or the Atlanta section. And if you got any questions, again, secretary@aes.atl.org, or hit us up on our social media pages. That's aesatl.org, Twitter and Facebook at aesatl, AES Atlanta, AES Atlanta, it's Twitter and Facebook, or Instagram, AES_Atlanta. So let's get back to our panelists here. Let's talk about prosumer and pro wireless systems, and the pros and cons of each. So Nick, if you want to start out, well, let's talk about, most people that I know usually start out with some type of Sennheiser because it's budget worthy and you get decent sound for what you're looking for. It's not, you know, thriller and killer sound, you know, but it's decent. It does
good enough to work with.
Yeah, functionality, right. Versus something like Letrosonics and Zaxcon, which can range anywhere for a receiver or a transmitter from 900 used, 600 to 900 used, on up to thousands and thousands of dollars for a whole kit.
Right. I would consider Sennheiser to be pro for a lot of reasons. It just depends on which models you're talking about. Now, when you're talking about G3s, they use G3s on the news, right? Sennheiser G3s are used for news. Now, when I use them, I got them for a very good price point, about $700. They actually came with an ME2 microphone as well. And what I loved about them was the fact that, you know, it just in terms of their interface, it was very intuitive to use, but they also came with a back plate. And I could take this back plate and it had a scroll wheel on it, and I could actually put it on the front of a camera. Now, the reason that was beneficial to me is, you know, initially I would use these as wireless that I put on Talent. But as I got more expensive pieces of wireless like Letrosonics, I started using these as IFB systems. So I was actually able to send the audio that I was receiving from the Talent from my mixer to camera as a scratch audio track that the editors could use to edit with. I also use this piece of gear for producers as something that they could listen into on a pair of headsets. So I definitely would consider Sennheiser to be a pro piece of gear. Even if you're doing live shows, they have a lot of stick mics that work really well. Sennheiser also creates rackable receivers as well. I would say some of the lower level stuff outside of Sennheiser, you know, all of the professional equipment that I would use would be anywhere in the world of Letrosonics, Sennheiser, and probably WYSICOM. Anything kind of outside, or Shure as well. Anything outside of that world, I'm really not touching.
Scott?
Yeah, I think that Nick was right on that. Sennheiser, for what it's used for in film and TV production, most of what people think of when they think of Sennheisers is they think the G Evolution series, your G3s and your G4s, and that's really their lowest level of what you would consider professional level gear. And the worlds that it's going to be prevalent in, news, a lot of people when they get out of school, like that may be their first set of wireless, or for camera guys who may need to keep an audio package, they're probably going to have some Sennheiser G3s on their audio package because they just need something simple to get the job done. They don't want to be in a spot where they can't just, set up for a couple people on an interview setup. And then a lot of the sound mixers in production sound, when they start getting more expensive than that, Electrosonics has been the go-to for years and years and years for the industry. In fact, their older receivers are great, used by, as I always tell people, that are looking for their first set of wireless. If they're considering the Sennheiser G3s, then they might as well consider a used Electrosonics system, and go with that, because you can get a lot of mileage out of those systems. When I'm thinking about professional wireless in today's space, Electrosonics and Zaxcom are the two biggest names that we see a lot of. WYSICOM is big, especially over in Europe. They're extremely big, and they're kind of known as some of the top of the heap for RF management with their antennas and their RF systems. Shure has really wonderful wireless. Their Axient system is very cool. We're waiting on them to get portable receivers. That's really the part that will make Shure start to be a bigger player in the professional market for production sound. Is just there needs to be some DC powered baggable receivers for that system to really take off. The audio limited A10 system is a digital system that people love for using on their booms. And there's been a lot of development just with the transitioning from having a spectrum of 500 megahertz to 700 megahertz, and basically losing the 600 to 700 megahertz to T-Mobile. Between that and the transition to digital RF wireless, there's a lot of new systems that are coming out from all the different manufacturers. And so it's kind of a space that the way we've known it has been pretty defined, but the way it's going to be known is kind of up to the products that are going to be coming out and are coming out right now.
Okay, since while we're still on wireless gear, let's say someone wants to get in it, they want to get a starter package. We've talked about mixers within the price range or quality that as a beginner you may want to use or look for as in used gear. But let's talk about wireless systems. What specifically should you look for? I'm looking for a specific answer. That's why I'm asking this question. What specifically should you look for when you make your purchase here in Atlanta? You mentioned part of the answer, but what should you specifically look for now when you make your purchase?
Are you talking field mixing?
I am talking, we could talk field mixing, or we could talk in general, abroad, when you're buying a wireless system now, especially used.
In my experience, I would go with anything Electrosonics.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going lower tier,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at 411s.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm looking at the SRB series,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that I'll be able to have 2 channels of wireless on one receiver, the same block.
Mm-hmm.
If you catch a really good deal, then you can get the SRC series wideband receivers, which would definitely put you in the game. It might cost you another $500, but the versatility that you'll have within the spectrum will allow you to get a variety of different frequencies in terms of your transmitters.
Mhm.
So that would be, you know, my advice. I noticed just working with other mixers, it's allowed me to be more compatible with their gear. If I'm working with somebody else, I can mix and match products. You know, let's say I'm working with, let's say there's a large Dante system, or let's say there's a large in-house system, and I have electrosonics transmitters that I can, you know, send a feed to them as well. Just having that type of gear just allows you to be more versatile. Scott, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It always helps to buy and own the equipment that people around you own, for any number of reasons. I would add one thing for people who are purchasing equipment, that you want to look for a gear that's going to be in the 500 to 600 megahertz range. So, all right, I guess I guessed it.
You guessed it.
So what that means is for Electrosonics, their gear is going to be labeled block 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. When you start getting to Electrosonics block 24, 25, 26, all of that stuff is going to be illegal, and worse than illegal, it's going to be real spotty if you try to use that in areas where they're using that spectrum for cell phone usage. And if you're doing something like sports, where they're going to have a frequency coordinator actively working, then it could even lead to you being asked to shut your equipment off on a job. So you want to make sure that your equipment is for the legal spectrum that we have to use. Just broadly, 500 megahertz to 600 megahertz. If you have doubts, talk to one of your professional audio dealers. That's one of the reasons that your pro gear dealers are so important as a professional, because they're not just, this is kind of where it bridges from the consumer and prosumer level to the professional level. Is when you buy a Zoom on Amazon, you're getting your Zoom on Amazon, and it's made because it's going to come to you from a distribution warehouse, and that's going to be the last professional service that you have. When you're buying from one of your professional dealers, you're getting their professional advice. You're getting advice that can impact you legally if you're looking at buying equipment that may be in an illegal chunk of spectrum. And then they just can assist the support of the gear and repairs and facilitating conversation with manufacturers when you have a problem. So I feel like from start to finish, that using one of the professional audio dealers is critical for anyone who's looking at being a professional in this space.
Very good answers. Great answers. So along with that, going back to Sennheiser G3, Electrosonics WYSICOM. As I have this discussion, there are certain microphones that come standard with the kit. What are you guys' experience with the mic that comes with them, the ME2s, versus your package that you have to transmit audio? What do you suggest and why?
When it comes to ME2s, the SPL, it can't take really, hard hits, these mics. So, if you have someone that says something very sharp or loud, you might get more distortion out of those types of microphones. Also, some of these microphones have different polar patterns. For a lot of the work that I do, my microphone of choice is the COS 11, the Sanken COS 11. I really enjoy that omnidirectional wireless microphone. It's amazing in the field. Not only have I used it as a body mic for talent, but I've also used it as a plant mic in a variety of different ways. I've worked on shows where, they had conversations in the car. So I would stick them in each visor I worked on shows where there were some production sound effects that I wanted to get. For example, like a car goes off of a ramp and then it crashes into another car. So what I ended up doing was at every sign at each corner, I actually had a plant mic there, because there were all these gun sound effects going off and all these different types of things. So you kind of never knew where things were going to happen. So that's been a really solid mic of choice for me. Of course, DPA makes some really nice microphones as well, but you just got to think about, when you're researching microphones, how is this microphone practical to you? How do you want to use this space? Are you looking for something that's going to be more directional, something that's omnidirectional? Do you want a boundary microphone? All of these things are tools that we have, within our toolbox that can allow us to capture sound creatively, because doing audio is not just doing audio, it's an art form. You're not, sound makers that do film, you're actually filmmakers that do sound. So we have to think like filmmakers and continue to be creative, especially when it comes to location sound, because we are artists.
Scott?
Yeah, I think my experience with the microphones that come in the kit is they kind of come out of the kit on day one, and you use them with mics that are usually the same as the rest of what you use. They're good mics if you just need a mic to get going, or a mic to handle something that's general purpose, then they work fine. Mics like that are fantastic to have on hand, to have, a crash mic when you need to put a mic into harm's way, when you need to, put something where you're not sure about how it's going to get handled, about what's going to happen to it. And to have backups. Backups is the most critical part of what we do, is that we can't fail once ever.
Right.
And so if you've got great mics, that's great. Have a halfway decent backup with you on hand, at the site. I've had microphones get yanked by, talent. They're trying to take off their mic pack. They pull something weird. I've had them just get pulled when they're taking the mic mount off. They may be pulling it by the wire and putting strain on the capsule. I've had mics go down when I'm trying to build them into like a little plant situation, and something doesn't fit just right. So equipment goes down. So I would never say that those mics aren't going to be needed, but usually when I'm putting together the mics that I'm going to take out first, they're all going to be the same type. Usually I use COS 11s. Some mixers have been going to the DPA microphones, and then some mixers like the Countryman B6s. But usually it's one of a handful of microphones that we're working with. And the reason that we like the microphones that we do is that they're small, they're easy to work with. They've got a lot of different mounts and little gadgets and rigs that you can rig them up for various ways that they can fit into clothing. And the mics that we use are, it's just generally those couple. So when we get the Sennheiser mic that comes with the kit, or the Electrosonics mic that comes with their kit, those usually go on the shelf to be used for backups, or for purposes where we might not want to put a $350 or $400 microphone element into play.
Right. Thanks. I think Scott mentioned frequency spectrum. We're just talking about here in the Atlanta area, when we talk about when you're pricing wireless, what to look for, because T-Mobile did buy the 600 frequency spectrum. You may get a lot of interference, which it became illegal if you still own those wireless packages. And they gave you options, and they told you they were coming and, to update and upgrade your wireless package. But we do have people that are listening internationally. That particular frequency spectrum may or may not affect you where you are. I think some of those, and you guys could probably attest to this, some of those wireless packages that we have in the 600 block 22 through 26 range may not be illegal in certain countries. So
It would be a good price for anyone that can use those frequencies. There's so much of that equipment is getting sold. Yeah, it's up to the sound mixer to know what is the legal frequency spectrum that they're operating in. And when you're traveling, it changes. So you need to know when you're going across state lines or across country lines, you need to know what is the legal area for you to be operating in and be ready to adapt. But yeah, for people in other countries that can buy the equipment that's in the 600 to 700 megahertz range, it's a great deal. There's a lot of it out there.
Yeah, I'll give you a prime example. So I filmed in La Paz, Mexico, right? You know, so in the States, you know, block 20 is fine, right? In La Paz, block 20 is terrible. But when we got to blocks 25, 26, and 7, it's clear. I mean, you know, there's nothing on the spectrum where we were at. But guess what? Those frequency blocks are unusable in the States. So definitely, like, if you guys are traveling or if you're in other countries, pay attention to, you know, what frequency spectrum will, you know, affect you and your gear, and that'll allow you to make conscious decisions on purchasing or also renting gear for a specific amount of time when you're doing a job.
Hey, we got Glen Trew, one of our panelists here, that just came through. Glen, we're talking about the frequency spectrum. Between here in Atlanta, we talked about what blocks are usable and not, and then we're talking a little bit about international blocks because we have a few international participants here. Can you expand on that thought? Being of Trew Audio and dealing with, you know, selling wireless and receiving wireless and exchanging wireless and dealing with that situation.
I can expand a bit. One is you're going to have issues. There's almost no way around it. There's so much of the spectrum that's in use by multiple participants now. There is a factor, and you're going to have issues with it. You have to plan, and then you have to have a plan B to deal with it. As far as which blocks are the best to use in any particular city, such as in Atlanta specifically, I couldn't tell you right now what it is. The staff at Trew Audio, particularly the local staff in Atlanta, does have a good handle on what blocks are you know, the most popular and which are the most open to use. But you know, the days where you could, like, you know, pick a few blocks or a few frequencies and go out and deal with it, those are good but distant memories. Yeah. On the other hand, your wireless are much more reliable and sophisticated than they were in the past. So it kind of evens out. In Nashville, where I'm based, and the most recent shows I've worked on are in Nashville, it's quite open. I was using, well, the blocks that are now not allowed, 25, 26. But also 2021, I never had any issues. You know, if we change locations, I could do a scan in the morning and avoid some stuff. Or usually it was to avoid other people using wireless, such as you know, when the behind the scenes crew would show up. We would always have to coordinate our wirelesses with each other. Typically, the production mixer you know, gets first pick, of course. So the behind the scenes sound person, you know, always checks in with the production sound mixer and to find out what blocks and frequencies are in use, and they work around that if possible. So, but I know it's kind of vague, but the best thing I can say about it is that you should expect it to be a factor more so in larger cities where it's more congested. And have a plan and assume it's not going to work. Have a plan B. And that one's probably not going to work either, but at least you got a head start on it.
Well, good. Yeah. Glen, I know you kind of joined us a little late. Did you want to give us a little background, your history what do you do, who you are, just to let us know. We have people online that have joined us, a lot of attendees. They're international, where you can be found, things of that nature.
Sure, sure. First of all, I'm sorry I'm showing up late. The time zones get the better of me sometimes, and I was off by an hour. But anyway, yeah, my name is Glen Trew. I'm a production sound mixer. That's been my craft for television and film since 1976. I assumed I was going to go into music, but my first job was at a television station. I found it, sound for TV and film. For me, it was more interesting than sound just for sound. It's more interesting because, to me, because you're working with a lot of other crafts at the same time. The camera people, the lighting people, the actors. And being based in Nashville, the reason shows come through Nashville usually is because there's music involved. So I was still able to integrate music almost in every production I worked on. So that's how I started. And eventually started renting out equipment and then hiring people to keep the equipment busy as things grew. And then that I turned it into a dealership, retail dealership in 1994, 1993, 94. And then it grew as a store since then. And fast forward to, I think it was the early 2000s, we opened up in Toronto, Canada, which was a great experience. And that store is doing well. It's a lot of fun, dealing internationally. The money still spent, but it's a different look. And anyway, it's really great and satisfying for me personally to basically speak the same language of sound for TV and film in more distant places. It's really interesting, I think. So then we opened up in Vancouver, and then took another left and went to Los Angeles, opened the Los Angeles store in 2010, 2011, and then opened up in Atlanta about five years ago. We just had our 5th anniversary. So we have 5 stores. But so I'm the owner of Trew Audio, but people ask me what I do, just what, speaking from the heart, I'm a production sound mixer. The business thing was more out of necessity, that I thought surely was going to fail, but it managed to succeed. But I'm still a bit of a duck out of water when it comes to business. It's a forced fit. But being a production sound mixer, I feel it's a very natural fit. I'm at home, very comfortable, and I feel like I'm in my place when I'm in the chair behind a cart, or I've had plenty of days with the bag around my shoulders too. So that's sort of it in a nutshell.
Good. I'm glad you mentioned bag, and I'm glad you mentioned cart. So I would like you to start this question. I know we're almost into it for an hour. I want you to answer this question. Explain the difference between bag mixing, cart mixing. Okay. There are probably more similarities than there are differences, but visually, of course, there's a big difference. The cart refers to basically a case on wheels that has all of your equipment in it. And it's like that because there's a lot of equipment in there usually, and you need to move it from place to place still. Sometimes just moving it across the floor in a studio. That happens a lot as we change sets. But also we change locations sometimes, so you have to be able to load it up into a trailer or a truck. So that's the cart, and typically that's on most commercials work that way. Television shows, movies, feature films. That's what we refer to as cart-based production. Then bag-based production is
is much more portable than that. We're actually walking around with your equipment at all times. And the bag usually has at least a shoulder strap. More sophisticated rigs have a harness that distributes the weight, preferably on your hips rather than your back and shoulders. And the cart, there's equipment made with carts in mind, and also other equipment made with bags in mind. Nearly all of it can go from one to the other. But typically the cart-based equipment is smaller, so there's more portable, has fewer controls. Typically the faders in a bag-based rig are rotary knobs as opposed to vertical faders. Typically there's a roll-off is usually the extent of the EQ section of a bag-based mixer recorder. So basically the biggest difference is portability. Bags are much more portable than carts. So any more specific questions you can think about it?
No, we're just going to share that question with Nick and Scott and have them elaborate a little bit more and add to it, because I know I've worked with both of them, and both of them are bag and cart mixes as well. So, this is, they can elaborate on what's in it, how, just build on what you've left us with. So either one of you guys, feel free to go ahead and join on in,
Yep.
add on.
Well, I think that, Glenn really hit the major points on the head. Usually with the cart setups, you may be getting into more detail as far as having multiple different comm sends. Usually in a bag setup, you're going to have your wireless coming in. You're going to have a boom pole that you're holding usually, and you're going to have sends that go out to the director and to the cameras that are going to need to record the program content. And that's going to be basically it for your bag setup. For your carts, you can get into, you've just got more space for more equipment. You've got better power options with being able to AC power and the large onboard batteries that you have for battery backup. And so you may have a specific communication send that you send to your boom or to your utility. You may have a contact transmitter that you're using for earwig transmission if people have hidden in-ear prompters. That's usually something that would be outside of the realm of what you would put into a sound bag. And the sound bags are usually meant to be worn by people who are going to either be on the sidelines of the room that the scene is being filmed in, or they're being, in the room next to it. And you're not usually having things like video monitors on board. If anything, you'd be looking at an onset monitor, or you'd be overlooking the scene as it happened. So that's usually where you get more power and flexibility out of the carts is in the monitoring capability and the different ways that you can send things to different people that need to hear what's going on.
Right, I agree with that as well. My ideas in my approach to audio when it comes to bag mixing versus cart mixing, it's all environment. What is the environment like? Because there have been plenty of times where I may have been on a show and I brought my cart, but I had to end up using my bag. There have been plenty of times where I've been on shows where I've only used a bag. So for example, if I'm in a 360 environment, then I'm probably going to be wearing a bag.
What's
for
a 360
example,
environment? What's a 360 environment?
I would consider a 360 environment where the cameras can be looking in any direction within a room. So, if I'm within that room and I don't know what to expect, for example, if you're working on a reality show and you don't know what you're walking into, and you're wearing your bag, the cameras can be shooting in this direction and then immediately turn all the way around. So I need to always be behind the cameras, and when they pan, they don't need to see me, right? So I can start a scene and the scene can start outside, and then I have to follow everything inside. So it just kind of depends on what type of environment you're going to be shooting in, and also what is your range going to be like, and if production has a big enough budget to allow you to either put up antennas everywhere, or do you have to move around with your bag? Now, the moments where I've ended up using both my cart and my bag, for example, is when I'm having a transitional scene. So just imagine there's a car scene where you basically have some type of GoPro setup, or maybe some type of camera mounted on the side of the car. I would want to drop my bag with the same frequency setup as my cart within that vehicle. So as they're driving, I'm recording the audio, but then when they transition out of the vehicle and continue the conversation, I can pick them up with my antennas that are sending the feed to my cart. So that way I won't lose any audio as they're going in and out of the vehicles because of the material. So, you know, for me, I like to personally arm myself with both of those things, especially when I'm on a show that you would consider like a cart-based show, like, you know, something that's a scripted TV series or a movie. But it just kind of depends on, hey, what is the environment like? There have been other shows that I've been on where I brought my cart, but guess what? They go down this alley that's like, you know, 200 feet long, right? My antenna might not shoot that far, or maybe the way that they're shooting it, you know, I can't get the right angle. So what do I have to do? I throw my bag on and I get right behind the camera. So, you know, it's just about creatively capturing the audio cleanly for me.
Okay, good. Very good answers, guys. Very good answers. Now, I want to talk about a couple things, and then we're going to turn it over to some questions. We have a few questions in our Q&A box here, but I want to ask a couple things because some things have come up. LGBTQ has come up in discussions. Race may have come up in discussions. Gender have come up in discussions. Now, because we have guys here representing Location Sound Mixer, doesn't mean that there aren't other people that are a part of this group, like women, LGBTQ members, other ethnicities, Asian, I mean, other nationalities that participate in this. We just have this small sample of our representation. Can you guys kind of extend or expand on that statement and just to let everyone know, because we have attendees that are international, what is the makeup of the sound community? Also include the sound department in that when you're making up that,
yeah, I'll tell you my experience in that area, which is I've been doing this for 40 plus years. I suppose it's, you know, some people could refer to as male dominated because there have been more males typically in the profession, but there's certainly a growing number of females you know, getting involved in this profession. But the point I would make is never, in my experience in those 40 plus years doing this, have I ever encountered a situation where race or gender was a factor in who got hired and who didn't. Yeah, if you look hard enough, you can find people with, you know, I don't know, preconceptions or preferences or something. Maybe you can find that. But I can say that I've never seen it. I've never heard it, never experienced it. So I think that's encouraging for everybody, that basically your success and the type of work you get is based on your performance and your experience, and nothing else. Yeah, of course you can find exceptions if you look hard enough, but I think you have to look pretty hard to find those. So other people might have had other experience, but that's mine.
Scott?
My experience has been that generally we've had a lot more recently over the last maybe 5-10 years, an uptick in the amount of females, and this is just speaking in the Atlanta area, that are being represented in the sound departments, and people that we're looking to hire. A lot of sound departments are conscious about certain shoots that I've seen in the past where it may be interviews with battered women or a particular type of content where they're going to want to make sure that they have a female utility available to put microphones on talent. That's generally when I've had issues where they're specifically looking for a female versus a male. And, you know, I think you could, you know, make some sort of argument about being inclusive, but I think everyone just recognizes that if they're looking for a female to make the talent comfortable with where they're at, that's generally been no problem. And generally the film sets have been inclusive, but it's like when you get any group of people together, there's going to be people that have differences and people that that are the way they are. But generally film sets have been very much about getting the work done as the top priority. So if you can get the work done and you can make yourself useful and productive in a film environment, then to me, that's what I find gets people pushed forward.
When it comes to the makeup of our community, I've definitely seen it grow over time. Just, you know, the short amount of time that I've been living in Atlanta, I've started to see all different types of people from all walks of life, ethnicities, cultures, and creeds, learn different skill sets, even within the makeup of the sound department. When it comes to racism, sexism, and discrimination, I've seen that in every profession that I've been in. You know, especially being a sound mixer, I see and hear everything. I've personally experienced it myself. I've seen people not get hired because of that, but I've also seen people get hired because of an ethnicity or because they may have been a female. So, you know, there's a wide gambit and variety of things that I've seen that, you know, are good and both bad. You know, that's just the world that we live in. And, you know, the only thing that we can continue to do is educate and motivate and be proactive about not spreading any type of hatred in that manner.
Great answers. I got two more questions and then we'll open it up to the Q&A section. The first question is, if you were someone who wanted to enter the field, what is your suggestion? Not saying it's perfect or it's the end all be all on how to enter the field of I want to say studio mixing, but that's not it. Location sound mixing. Anyone can answer.
Get a mentor. Get a mentor. Absolutely. Connect with other mixers. Get a mentor. You know, go to all the Trew audio locations. Make sure you get to know the people there. You know, a lot of times these guys have insight about different shows that are coming in town, or also, you know, different types of equipment that people are using. Go to every single film festival that you see. Go to every meetup, reach out to people. But last but not least, just make TV shows. Just create content. You know, we are in a profession where this is all about the things that you do, and people only remember you for the last project that you worked on. So if you're getting started, don't be afraid to reach out to a group of friends. Don't be afraid to jump on Craigslist and get your chops wet. Don't be afraid to reach out to a mentor and ask them, hey, can I shadow you? One day I want to be a sound mixer. Can I shadow you? Hey, I want to be a sound utility right now. Can I shadow you? Hey, I want to be a boom op. Can I shadow you? Reach out to, you know, your local unions and figure out when they're having events and how you can get involved. Volunteer at events, participate. You have to get active. And this goes for anything that you guys want to do in life. The best thing that you can do is get started.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can add much to that, because that's basically it. But I was going to say that I think you have to really want to do it. You need to have this internal desire because you enjoy sound, you enjoy the electronics process of manipulating sound to have a recording that fits the picture. You have to really want to do that. in my case, it's just something I always wanted to do and stayed at it. And then grew as time went on. But absolutely attend all the events. There's events at Trew Audio all the time and other business similar to ours. There's online forums to get involved with. There's so many ways to learn, and also you need to not be discouraged, because it is difficult to get in. Luck is involved often as much as anything. Luck might have to do with when your career starts and starts to take off, but it's almost always going to require working hard to make it happen. Just want to do it, and also here's something. The film business is largely freelance type work, which means you only get rehired if people like what you did before. Okay, it's based on your performance. Not only is it the performance of the sound you record, but it's how you work with other people. Which is probably more important than actually getting a good recording, because that'll have an effect on the rest of the production. So you want to work very well with others as a team member, be pleasant to work around, and just stay after it. That's what it comes down to, I think.
Yep. I think, what Glenn said was great. Like, everybody has their own path to get into this. I can't tell you what your path is going to be. If you ask me, how am I going to get into this? You just have to go at every single direction that you can. And when you get a little toe in, you get 2 toes in. And when you get 2 toes in, you get 3 toes in until you get a foot in the door, and just do with it what you can. And what Nick said that I'd like to kind of highlight is, for people who are getting started in this industry, to have that connection and have that relationship with someone who's going to be higher up that food chain than you are, that's further along that path, that can let you know the right ways and the wrong ways to get plugged into the community. A lot of people that may be new or beginning into the field, they think that, well, I just need to learn what I need to learn. I need to get my foot in the door and get a gig under my belt, and I just need to go off and start putting myself on the market. And I think it's real important, especially in the Atlanta community, that people get connected to the people who are further along in the specific type of work that they want to do, and they have that dialogue with the members of the community, because a lot of the people in this community are super happy to talk to people who are up and coming. They'll give them the time of day. You may get some contacts about who to connect with in the community that may be along your lines, like what Nicholas was talking about with going to your pro shops and talking to the people there. They're going to be involved with people who are doing the types of work that you want to be doing, and they may know the people that you need to be talking to. So being plugged in with the community that already exists, that's going to kind of show the way forward and help you when you get to questions that you have about business and how you want to be pricing yourself, how you want to be charging for the things that you offer to your clients, and how you want to be resolving issues. You want that to be in line with what other people professionally are doing. When you get hired for a job that's referred to by one of your peers, you're going to be one of the top 3 or 4 names that they think of when someone calls them for a job that they need to pass along. So it may take a little bit to be on that top list of names that someone thinks of when they have a call. But being well connected and on good terms and keeping the same, conditions for work that the people around you keep is kind of one of the ways to get into the business and do it in a way that you're not coming in and stepping on anyone's toes or ruffling people's feathers, because a lot of times you won't hear back any sort of criticism. You just sort of start getting radio silence. And that's a good way to get plugged in and kind of do it the right way.
Yeah, Jameul, I'll give you a perfect example. Like, one of my mentors, Peter Redding, like, this is someone who made a lot of films, that I watched growing up as a child, right? And you guys got to understand, like, having a mentor is like a shortcut in life when it comes to this business. You know, of course, you could be that YouTube University person. You could be that person that reads all these books. But guess what? There's not one moment when you can pause that video and ask a question, right? There's not one moment where you've got someone in front of you to literally walk you through each menu setting and tell you what every setting of this menu does and how it affects you. There's nobody that can give you the psychology of some of the things that you need to prepare for when you're going into a job. And, you know, that's why having someone that you can shadow and having a mentor is so important, because you can literally skip years just by sitting down and having a few conversations about certain things within the industry that's going to help you be successful, you know, from that day forward.
Yeah, two things I'd like to add to what Scott said in particular about everybody has a different path to get into production sound mixing. And two good examples. Well, first example, I'll go ahead and drop the name of a good friend of mine, Peter Devlin. Started in Belfast, and he wanted to do movies. Specifically, growing up in Belfast, he wanted to do American movies. That's what he wanted to do. So he had no particular interest in sound, but sound was his first opportunity to get into television and movie production. So the love of sound, you know, came along the way. For me, I cared nothing about movies, nothing about the picture or TV show. For me, it was all about sound and audio. Then the love of the art form, you know, came along the way. So two very different paths put us basically in the same place. So keep, if you don't have a, you know, this huge passion for audio and sound, but you want to get into movies and sound is your opportunity, go ahead and embrace that. It can pay off big time. The other thing I wanted to mention, I asked a similar question to a mentor of mine. And I interviewed him for a magazine article when he was, I guess he was 82 years old. And he died soon after the article was published. So I asked him what he would tell young people starting in this industry. And he had a few things to say, but the most profound to me was when he said, every step forward that I take was based on a step that I'd taken before. So you do it in steps and make sure that the steps that you're on, you make the best of them, because that's going to have effect on the steps going forward. So do it a bit at a time. You can't expect everything to happen very quickly overnight. Sometimes you get lucky. Some people get luckier timing wise than others, but do it a step at a time. And it takes patience, and it almost always takes quite a while to get established to the point where that you really, where you really want to be, but you can get there.
Scott, want to add to that?
I mean, I think that's all great. I mean, for people to just realize that it takes years of experience to get years of experience. And so, you know, you can know the manuals, you can know the gear, you can know everything you need to know. You've still got to build up that experience level. And the only thing that's going to get that is, you know, having a mentor. That's a real good way to shortcut and to learn from somebody else's years of experience. And then just, you know, getting your feet wet and your hands dirty in it. And, you know, just being real careful as you're getting started out, because sound has so many different places that it reaches. A lot of people can get invited into an area that they may have less experience with, and maybe considering a job that they're wanting to know, well, am I setting myself up for failure? Is this job going to be too big of a next step for me to take? And I think it's real important to just, like, you do have to take those next steps and to do the job that this is the first time that I've ever done a job like this. But just, you know, that's why it's important to talk to people who are around you that may have more experience in a certain field. They may be able to listen to the particulars of a job that you're considering and say, this is a job that you should take, or this is a job that you should really pass on for now. Being able to know when you're taking that next step, how big of a next step to take can be a scary process, but that's also kind of sometimes the fear of needing to, like, it just cannot mess up no matter what. And that fear can sometimes be a healthy thing in the right context.
All right, I'd like to thank you guys for answering these questions. This is what I would like to do. I'll take like a minute and a half, do some housekeeping real quick. You guys take a drink of water, and then we'll get to the Q&A part. Got word from Cujo. Cujo isn't feeling well, so he couldn't join us today. He said he appreciates you guys showing up and helping out, and he said he thanks you guys for appearing and helping out at this time, and hopefully he gets a little better. So I'll do a little housekeeping. You guys grab some water, and we'll get right back to it. Quick. So I'd like to thank everyone who showed up today as our attendees for our Location Sound Mixer Zoom event. And just going to do a couple of housekeeping. If you're interested in AES, go to aes.org to sign up, become a member. If you want to become a part of our section, and we're still looking for section members and committee members, and we have an election coming up in September. If you'd like to participate with us, you can go to aesatl.org and look under Atlanta section and sign up and become a member. Also, you can find us on our social media sites at Twitter and Facebook at AES Atlanta, and on Instagram at AES_Atlanta. We want to thank our panelists and everyone for attending our webinar today. For any questions or interests in our upcoming elections for 2021 through 22, we look for officers. Please email secretary@aesatl.org. That's secretary, SECRETARY at aesatl.org. We'd love to have you. If you're interested, come and join us and build with us here in our community. So let's, where'd it go? So let's get back to our, where'd it go? Here we go. So let's get back to our panelists. We have some questions that are coming from all over the place, actually. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Let me see. Yeah, not that. I'm trying to get back to our Zoom site here. You guys still there? Yeah, you guys are still there. Let me see where we are. We should be here. Something
Still here.
Yeah, I hear you guys. There we go. Here you go. I had to go to my sidebar. So let's see what we got here. Q&A section. Okay, we answered that. We had a question about cart mixer versus bag mixer. Okay, we have one from Edwin. He said, how has digital and network audio impacted your on-location gear and production considerations? Have you had to use other resources for assistance, maybe even on site?
I can get into that a little bit. As far as digital audio, all of our recorders have been digital for quite some time now. The thing that's changing for digital versus analog is we're seeing a lot of digital wireless becoming more and more common these days. People using them on their Talent wireless, on their booms, on their sends. We're kind of making that transition, and that's been a major change for sound quality and also the way that we work with our RF signals. Can be a little different as we're moving from, analog RF transmission to digital RF transmission and how all that works. As far as networked audio, that is being used a fair amount on certain types of sets. The situations where I see networked audio being used the most is things like competition elimination format shows, where you may have all of the cast members mic'd. You may have many different audience mics or plant mics placed around the stage. And you need to get this multi-track audio to the control room where it's going to be mixed. You may need to have it in separate producer stations where they need to be able to pull up talent, you know, Josie's wire, or they need to listen to Henry's wire, and they need to be able to have a push button where they can either push between multiple camera shots or multiple microphones that may be getting recorded. And those are the sorts of areas where I see networked audio being used. And the primary protocol that is becoming the mainstay is Dante. Dante is what most people are using for networked type situations.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of network type situations, again, in game shows like Scott mentioned, but also reunion TV shows. For example, when you have to run, you know, 25 to 40 channels of wireless, you have every talent wired, you're sending audio to, you know, every camera, and there's like, you know, 15 cameras. You have like 6 or 7 different types of IFB feeds where they can, you know, isolate, you know, each person's wireless or any grouping of wirelesses that you create. Those are the instances when I see a lot of networking, when I have a higher track count. Normally, if I have anything that's, you know, 12 or below, I'm not using a lot of networking because it's not needed unless I have a really, really far cable run to make.
Glenn, you want to add to that?
Well, yeah. When I think about when our profession went digital, I think about when it went from either mono or 2-track quarter-inch tape recording with a Swiss-made Nagra recorder to, you know, to digital DAT, still on tape, a linear DAT tape. There wasn't much difference there, except they were less expensive to buy, didn't sound as good. But so I think now digital refers to going nonlinear, you know, hard drive based recording or flash card based recording. The biggest difference there is the number of tracks, which allowed us to do a mix and do pre-fader isolation tracks for post-production, almost of unlimited track count. So that's the biggest difference there. But keep in mind, the mono mix is still very valuable in most situations, even though in post-production they have the ability to do pre-fader isolation tracks to remix. There's a lot of reasons to keep doing a good mix, a good mono mix. One is for onset monitoring. Also, the post-production workflow, the mono mix is often used to pick out which tracks to edit. There's quite a few reasons to use the mix tracks later on. And in a lot of instances, the mono mix is the preferred way you know, to go with the edit. It's actually used in the final product. And so much depends on the type of show, the capability of post-production, the time involved, the time allowed for post-production might be limited, which means they need to rely more on the mono mix. So anyway, so now we do with nonlinear recording, which is virtually every recorder we use now, is the mix, typically, especially in North America, on track 1. And then the remaining tracks are used for pre-fader isolation tracks.
All right, very good answers. We have a question from the UK. It says, greeting from the UK, folks. How do you folks see the future of RF worldwide? Any chance of a bit of bandwidth that will work for US and around the world? What do you guys think?
No.
It's not going to happen.
I see everything going digital, honestly. There's a strong transition there, especially when you start having companies take their hybrid systems to full digital, and these digital systems are not only rackable, but when they become as portable as some of these other pieces of gear, I can see the entire world adapting that model just because of, you know, frequency modulation and propagation. When you're getting hits, when wireless signals are really close in frequencies, you don't have those types of issues when it comes to a digital wireless system. The biggest issue that you have is actually how massive and how heavy, how large these pieces of gear can be when it comes to their receivers. But if they ever make anything that's portable and works and sounds really well, I can definitely see everywhere adopting digital systems.
So what's a hit? Since you said hit, I don't think everyone understands. Well, I don't put it like this. I don't know. I know what it is, but I don't know what it is. What do you mean by hits?
So a hit is actually when you have two frequencies that are really close in how close they are in terms of their number, or if they're directly crossing over each other. So what will happen is you will basically have an unwanted noise that will occur.
Okay, good.
Unwanted noise, or sometimes in digital transmissions, it just results in a dropout.
Or a dropout, right? Yes.
Yeah, where the signal isn't strong enough amongst the noise to be allowed in, so it just mutes. Preceded by a brief Darth Vader sound. Yes. Yeah, but there's still quite a few. In fact, most of the wireless we're using now are analog transmissions, analog FM transmissions, and when you have interference either from a TV station or another production in the lot next door, you'll get it's called a hit, like Nicholas said, and because it's like a zap or an odd noise.
And you can also get phasing as well.
Yep. Yeah, phasing can reduce the signal to where you get noise. So that's why they call it a hit, because it sounds like something's been hit.
Right. We have another question about ambience. He said, what's your opinions or experience on ambient recordings for films? Is ambience recording a thing when recording on location, or does this not fit into schedules? Is it practical to use a large microphone array for multi-channel Atmos productions? Thanks.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I want to jump in and answer that one first. I'm a huge fan of ambience. I think that can make the difference between sound for a picture that sounds natural and one that doesn't. Unfortunately, we're getting more used to sounds that don't match the picture. But I really think that our job as production mixers is to get sound that can sound like the picture looks. And ambience is one way to do that. So probably the question more involved recording ambience separately so that it can be blended in later to help with editing. And it used to be, we're talking like back in the 70s, that was required with every scene setup. It was absolutely required and allowed for. As time went on, particularly as wireless lavaliers became more and more usable, it became less important because there wasn't as much cutting that needed to be done with sound. Also, when you get the microphone so close to the actor, there's not any ambience to match anyway, which is not a good thing, but that's kind of the world we live in right now. But it's much more rare to ask for ambience and much more rare for it to be allowed, because it does take at least 15 seconds every time to get it. And a lot of times if you ask for ambience, sometimes you're just laughed at and they move on. There's and you got to fight for it. The show I most recently did, the Nashville show, the editors actually asked for it because the soundstage we had wasn't ideal. Had a lot of noise, whether it was generator noise or fan noise or rain noise or something. They actually asked for ambience, and I said, put it in an email and copy these people. And they did, which is the only reason we got it. And from that point on, for the rest of the 9-month season, we got ambience at the end of every new scene, every new location we did. We got it. It wasn't any big deal. People, it didn't cause us to go overtime. We're already overtime. But anyway, it's something that can be done. It's helpful, and it just depends on the show, whether you can get it or not.
I think ambiance is practical based on the shooting style as well. You know, if you're shooting a feature or any kind of scripted TV series, I am a huge advocate of getting ambiance. You know, especially, you know, the sound designer in me says, shoot it all in stereo, right? But then again, you know, there are other instances where, you know, it's not as practical. For example, like when I'm sound supervisor on TI and Tiny, we're not holding for room tone on a reality show. They're just gonna cut the dialogue in from the interviews anyway. Now, will I grab some room tone or ambiance during the interview? Absolutely, but within the field of a reality TV show, it hasn't been anything that's been practical. Only for the most part when I'm working on a scripted series or a scripted movie.
I should say also, since I know we have a lot of people with the AES that are watching that are not in film production, they might wonder what ambience is that we're talking about. So it's usually known by 3 different terms. Ambience is one, room tone is another, and some people call it world tone. It's just the sound of the environment without anyone speaking. So a lot of times we'll ask for, let's say 15, we used to ask for 30 seconds of room tone, which when you're doing 30 seconds of room tone, it can seem like an hour and a half. So now we ask for 15 seconds of room tone and hope we get 10. But basically recording room tone or ambience is you record, everybody gets perfectly quiet and motionless, and you record 15 seconds of that nothingness. And in doing so, you're recording, you know, the hums, the air conditioning from the building three doors down, so that if you need in editing to fill in blank spaces between dialogue or between words, then you've got matching ambience to lay in under it. Also in ADR, you don't have that ambience going on, which is ADR is automatic dialogue replacement, where you replace the dialogue. So if you have ambience, you're able to, in post-production, slide it under the replaced dialogue so that it matches the dialogue that was done on the set. So that's room tone, ambience, or world tone.
Good. I have another question. It's a time code question. It's for me, it's fairly simple because I experienced it. But the question is, how is time code distributed on set from audio to video?
I can take that one. So the way that we handle time code on most of our sets is generally on a lot of shoots, if there's no specific department in charge, then the sound department often ends up handling it. On film sets, you may have someone from the video crew or someone from tech handling the time code, and they'll have a master clock. When you've got the master clock, wherever it comes from, then that's the clock that's running the time for the whole show. And you'll either physically take a cable and what we call jam, which is take other time code sync boxes and get that time code signal synchronized with the master. And then those sync boxes either jam the cameras or they're attached to the camera rigs and they live on the cameras all day. So essentially for anyone who's unfamiliar with what exactly the purpose for time code is, it's one synchronous time clock that makes it so that every single camera that's shooting, when they're ticking over each frame that they're recording, that it's synchronous with all the other cameras, and that the audio tracks that are being recorded are on that same timeline. When you get it into the edit, you can then drop your video clips and your audio tracks onto your timeline, and with the time code, they synchronize with each other no matter when the recording and stop recording were pressed. during the day they drop onto the timeline.
Yeah, there's actually a new system that's come out. Speaking of timecode, it's called the DISH system, which gets its timecode clock from satellites, which is kind of interesting because no matter where you are in the world, if you have this particular timecode generator called the DISH, it's a small box like the others, you have the same timecode, exact same timecode. You know, so that's brand new. It's not even available yet, but in a couple of months it will be. So it's something different. And we always talk about drift with timecode because after a while, the timecode generators, as good as they are, will drift apart from each other. We're talking like a frame, a 30th of a second in 8 hours is a typical good amount of accuracy. So let's say, you know, 1 frame in 8 hours. That's a good acceptable amount. The DISH system, since it uses satellite clock, its accuracy is 1 frame every 300,000 years.
Wow.
So, yeah,
300,000 years.
when I first did that calculation, I thought this can't be right. So I did it 1 frame in 300,000 years.
Hope I can see that.
That's good enough.
All right, we're down to about 3 minutes. I got one more question, and then we'll wrap things on up. We do really appreciate you guys coming and taking your time out of your day to share your expertise in the field of location sound mixing. The last question is, it's a financial question, but it deals with gear. So the question pertains to when you receive a job, how do you handle either bringing your own gear, or how do you handle if gear is provided?
I would say always push for your gear. And the reason I say that is, number one, let's just talk maintenance. If you don't know where that gear is coming from, or if that rental house doesn't have a good track record, you might not know what to expect in terms of if things are working or if things are not working. There might be some little small intricacies with cabling or things being put together properly. The second reason why I say if you have an opportunity to bring your gear is not only will you have the opportunity to get paid for your labor, but you'll also be able to make money on your equipment as well. And who doesn't want more income within the world that we live in right now?
That's what Nick was mentioning with knowing where the gear has been and its upkeep is super important. One of the biggest things that our clients hire us for when they're hiring a professional to handle their sound, even bigger than, I would say, you know, just the sound quality, which a lot of sound mixers and sound engineers, when we think about our product, we want to think about the quality of it. But what our clients are thinking about is it has to work the first time 100%, and they need the deliverables on their drive at the end of the day. That is their number one job. So anything that you can do that lets you take care of that client and being able to deliver 100% is super important. So having gear that has backups. A lot of us sound mixers, when we use our gear, it's sitting in the exact same sound bag or on the exact same equipment rack as it was on the last job we used and the last 10 jobs that we did that were the exact same. The only thing that changed was we turned it off at the end of one day and we turned it on at the beginning of the next. And having that equipment that you know the history of it, you've picked the parts that go together, you've got a system where your backups are ready to just slot right in. If you have equipment that goes down, you pull your next piece out and you put it into work. That's really one of the critical things that we do. So so I do encourage people to own their own gear and to, you know, if you're going to be going into a space where rental gear is going to be needed, work with a rental provider who works in your space, working with the professional audio shops that that have gear for our purposes, for our use, even down to getting a shop that specializes in production audio recording versus a rental house that's dealing mainly with, say, live concert shows and that sort of thing. Having that support is super critical for what we do. And it all comes down to being able to do 100% the right job, turn in the right deliverables, get the right recording, and do it the first time all the way to the last time.
Here's something I'll add, because you mentioned I think the best way to handle rental income from your equipment that you own is to not spend it. Especially when you're starting off. I think we should look at the equipment as something that's going to get us the work so that we can bill for our services, and then that's our income. I think the income that we get from renting our equipment package typically should be used to buy more equipment, because then that will further our career. And also, usually as your career advances, the equipment that you're going to be buying is probably more expensive. So if you say, all right, I'm renting my equipment, I've got more income, and then you start living off of that income, when maybe you could eat a little less and still survive. So when you get the income from your equipment rental, keep it in a separate account and use it to add more equipment. And then once you get established in your career and everything's paid for, then start to enjoy additional income from your equipment.
All right, thank you, fellas. Thank you. I'm gonna add this, then we'll close out. Being this location sound mixer sounds easy because all you're doing is wiring talent and receiving a signal. That's not true. And I had, as of recent, last year, someone gave me a check, and it was a big old heavy reality check. That thing weighed me down so much. And what was stated to me is that you don't really get paid to record sound. You get paid to troubleshoot. That's what you get paid for. Recording is fine. A lot of people can learn that, but you really get paid to troubleshoot, to prevent trouble from happening, to get the best sound you can get. And when I got slapped with that check, I was like, yeah, let me reevaluate my life right now. So again, look at it that way. It's fun. You can have a lot of fun on set. I mean, the work is real nice, fun. You meet a lot of different and creative people. And work is fun. Work is fun. It can be very exciting. You don't want to make it a burden, but just, you get paid to troubleshoot.
I would say location sound is 90%, 10%. 90% of my job is completed before I arrive. 10% of my job is actually while I'm there. And what I mean by that is the 6 Ps. Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. Everything that I do before I clock in, before call time, is what is going to affect the rest of the day. Literally, me prepping all of my wireless, cutting my mole scan, checking my signals, making sure I have all of my equipment organized, making sure things are clean, rebatting my wireless the night before if that's what I decide to do, recycling the old batteries, checking my time code slate, making sure that everything is already interfaced with time code and locked into my system. So when I arrive the next day, literally all I do is open up all of my gear and I'm ready to go. If I'm working by myself, I grab the time code boxes, I put it on the cameras. If I'm working with a team, I have my team do what they need to do. But within 30 minutes, I'm up and I'm ready to go. And that's the type of speed that this business needs in order for you to be successful. You literally have to think on your feet and solve problems at any moment. You don't want to be solving the bigger issues that are happening on set if you're not prepared for it. So you can actually solve a lot of the things the night before just by being ready to go.
Mm-hmm. All right, all right, all right. Well, we appreciate our panelists for joining us today. We're going to have another one next year, so we'll keep everyone posted. Get your questions ready. And one more thing, AES ATL committee is open if you guys want to become members and be a part of the committee. We're also looking for people to serve in higher positions on the committee as well. So if you don't have a membership, go to AES. AES.org, find your section, which our particular section is in Atlanta section, and sign up and become a member. And that's it. We're glad you guys joined us, and we thank everybody who participated and came in listening. And if you have any questions, go ahead and you can send them to secretary@aes.atl.org, or what did we see? I think it's secretary@aes.org. Yep, secretary@aes.org. No, AES-ATL, because we got to know where you're going. Secretary@aes.atl.org. So secretary@aes.atl.org or chair@aes.atl.org. So glad everybody could join us, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for having us. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
See you
Thank
later.
you so much, Jameul and AES. We appreciate it.